She was never his real mother, but the night he almost disappeared forever, she proved something stronger than blood. She proved what it truly means to love a child who doesn't love you back. The rain hadn't stopped since morning, tapping softly against the windows of the small suburban house where Emily stood alone in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee gone cold. It had been 3 years since she married Daniel, and 3 years since she became a mother to his young son, Lucas, a boy with quiet eyes and a heart full of walls. He never called her Mom. In fact, most days, he barely spoke to her at all. After Daniel died in a sudden car accident just a year into their marriage, the house that once felt warm turned painfully silent. The grief settled into every corner, but it affected them in different ways. Emily tried to hold the broken pieces together, while Lucas slowly drifted away from her, building a distance that felt impossible to cross. To Lucas, Emily was never meant to stay. She was just someone his father brought into their lives, a temporary presence that somehow became permanent after everything went wrong. In his young mind, emotions tangled into blame, and even though he never said it out loud, a part of him believed that if Emily hadn't come into their lives, maybe his father would still be alive. That silent resentment showed in everything he did, the way he ignored her questions, avoided eye contact, and shut his bedroom door a little harder than necessary. But Emily never stopped trying. Every morning, she woke up early to make his breakfast exactly the way he liked, even if he left it untouched. She packed his school lunch with little notes she knew he would never read. She attended every school meeting, sat quietly at the back during his events, and clapped the loudest even when he refused to look at her. On his birthdays, she baked cakes from scratch, carefully decorating them, hoping that maybe this year he would smile. But he never did. Still, she smiled for him, hiding the quiet ache in her chest. Late at night, when Lucas was asleep, Emily would sit alone in the living room holding old photos of Daniel, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "I'll take care of him," she would say softly, her voice trembling. "I won't give up on him, no matter what." And she never did. One cold evening, as the sky turned dark earlier than usual and the air carried the sharp bite of winter, something felt wrong. Lucas didn't come home from school. At first, Emily tried to stay calm, telling herself he was probably just with friends. But as the minutes turned into hours, her heart began to race. She called his classmates, his teachers, even checked nearby stores. No one had seen him. Panic took over. She grabbed her coat and rushed out into the freezing streets, calling his name over and over, her voice echoing into the empty night. The rain started again, heavier this time, soaking her clothes and blurring her vision, but she didn't stop. Every worst fear ran through her mind, the same fear she had lived through when Daniel never came home. "Not again, please, not again," she whispered through tears. Finally, after what felt like forever, she found him. Lucas was sitting alone on a broken swing in an abandoned playground, his small body drenched, his head lowered, completely still. For a moment, Emily froze, relief crashing into her so hard it almost took her breath away. Then she ran to him, dropping to her knees and pulling him into her arms without hesitation. "I was so scared," she whispered, her voice shaking uncontrollably. "I thought I lost you too. I can't lose you too." At first, Lucas resisted, his body stiff, unsure of how to react. But then he felt something unfamiliar, her hands trembling, her heartbeat racing, her tears falling on his shoulder. This wasn't anger, this wasn't obligation, this was fear, real fear. He slowly looked up at her, confusion filling his eyes. "Why do you even care?" he asked, his voice breaking. "You're not my real son. You don't have to do all this." Emily didn't let go. She gently held his face, her eyes filled with tears but steady with truth. "You're right," she said softly. "I didn't give birth to you, but I chose you. I chose to stay. I chose to love you, even when you pushed me away." Her voice cracked, but she continued. "You are not my responsibility, Lucas. You are my heart." Those words hit something deep inside him. All the anger he had been holding on to suddenly felt heavier than before, like it didn't belong anymore. "But I thought you'd leave too. Everyone leaves." Emily shook her head immediately, pulling him closer. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "Not now, not ever." And in that moment, something inside Lucas finally broke, not in pain, but in release. He started crying, quietly at first, then uncontrollably, years of loneliness pouring out all at once. For the first time since his father died, he allowed himself to feel, and, more importantly, to trust. He held on to Emily tightly, like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. That night changed everything. The silence between them didn't vanish overnight, but it softened. Lucas started sitting at the dinner table again. He began answering her questions, short answers at first, then longer ones. Emily never pushed him. She simply listened, giving him the space he needed to heal. Slowly, their house began to feel alive again, not because the pain was gone, but because they were no longer carrying it alone. Months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, sunlight gently filled the kitchen as Emily stood making pancakes. She heard soft footsteps behind her, but didn't turn around, thinking Lucas would just grab something and leave like usual. But instead, he stayed. There was a small pause. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Mom, can you help me with my homework?" Time seemed to stop. Her hands froze, her heart skipping a beat as those words echoed in her mind. She slowly turned around, her eyes already filled with tears, unsure if she had heard correctly. But Lucas stood there, looking a little nervous, a little unsure, but different, softer. She smiled through her tears and nodded gently. "Of course," she said, her voice full of warmth. And in that single word, Mom, every sleepless night, every silent tear, every moment of unconditional love finally found its meaning.